Kaela was a young technician working on the radar systems of Zorvax, her first real job. After completing her training, she had always dreamt of being part of something greater, of playing a role in the great technological advancements of her people. But now, as she sat in the radar control room, the excitement was slowly replaced by the stillness of routine, the humming of the machines, the quiet tap of her fingers on the console, the occasional shift of another technician in the background. All of it felt so ordinary. Her job was simple: monitor the radar and look for any unusual activity or anomalies that could pose a threat to the planet. Zorvax had lived in peace for centuries. The calmness of space surrounding it was a far cry from the bustling cities and technological wonders that lay on its surface. But Kaela knew her duty. She could spend hours analyzing the usual patterns of asteroids and comets passing by it. Had all become predictable, and yet there was something comforting in that predictability. She leaned back in her chair, stretching as she glanced at the radar screen before her. Everything was quiet, nothing out of the ordinary. But then her eyes caught something small, a flicker, a tiny blip at the very edge of the radar range. She hesitated at first, wondering if it was just a glitch or a minor system error, but the blip didn't disappear, it remained steady. And then it started to grow slowly. Kaela sat forward, her fingers moving quickly over the controls, trying to get a better look at the signal. The strange little dot seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive. It was unlike anything she had seen in her years working with the radar systems, a signal that was too consistent to be an anomaly, but also too distant to be anything of immediate importance. She narrowed her eyes, focusing on the data. It didn't seem to be from an asteroid or any known object in the area. She zoomed in on the coordinates, trying to make sense of it, but nothing she checked matched anything in the system. She leaned closer, her heart beginning to race as the signal kept growing stronger. This wasn't just a small flicker anymore. It was a clear and defined reading. Someone or something was out there. It was definitely a craft. But where had it come from? And who was controlling it? The signal wasn't like anything Zorvax had encountered before, not from their own ships or any known species. Kaela's fingers hovered over the transmission controls. She knew she had to report this, but part of her hesitated. What if it was a mistake or a misreading? What if it was something harmless, something that didn't matter? She thought about the other technicians, how they would probably dismiss it as nothing more than a blip. She had seen her colleagues ignore similar signs before, but this felt different. It felt important. It felt like she was staring at the unknown. Taking a deep breath, she finally made the decision, her voice trembling slightly as she pressed the button to report the signal to her supervisor and wait for their instructions. As the transmission went through, she stared at the radar screen, not sure if she was ready for whatever would come next. The seconds felt like minutes as Kaela waited for her supervisor to respond, her mind racing with questions about the mysterious signal. What could it be? Who was out there? She had seen signals before, but never like this. This one was different. It held a presence, a weight that she couldn't shake. As she stared at the radar screen, the signal now steadily pulsing, brighter and more defined with each passing moment. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, her supervisor's voice crackled through the speaker system. "Kaela, are you sure about this report?" The hesitation in his voice was clear. He was expecting this to be nothing more than an error, something easily dismissed. But the signal didn't lie. It was there, it was real, and it was waiting to be understood. Kaela nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "It's real, sir. The signal is coming from beyond our known range, and it's not a glitch." She spoke with a certainty she hadn't expected to feel, but there was no turning back now. She had to be sure. She had to find out what was out there. There was a long pause before her supervisor spoke again, his tone now serious. "Kaela, are you certain this is worth the risk? We have protocols for a reason. We can't simply engage with every strange signal that pops up. You know the rules. The Zorvaxian people have avoided direct contact with unknown species for millennia. We don't know what this could be." Kaela's mind was spinning, the words echoing in her head. Protocols, procedures, rules. She understood all of them, but none of it mattered now. This was something else. This was beyond rules. This was about discovery. This was about a chance to learn something that could change everything she had ever known. She couldn't just let it go. She took a deep breath, her voice more confident now. "I understand the risks, sir, But this is different, this signal. It's not like anything we've seen before. It's not random, it's structured. It feels intentional. I think someone or something is trying to make contact, and I need to know who it is. I need to find out what this is." There was silence on the other end, and for a moment Kaela feared she might have crossed a line that she couldn't come back from. But then her supervisor's voice returned. "Kaela, you know the consequences. If this turns out to be a mistake, you're on your own with this. If you continue, you will be responsible for any fallout." She swallowed hard, her heart pounding, but there was no hesitation in her reply. "I'm ready, sir. I'll take full responsibility. Just give me the go-ahead." Another pause followed, and Kaela felt as if time itself had stopped then. Finally, her supervisor spoke in a quiet but resolute tone. "Fine, proceed, but keep us updated every step of the way." Kaela felt a rush of relief, mixed with an undeniable thrill. As she turned her attention back to the radar screen, the signal was still there, growing stronger and clearer by the second. Her hands moved swiftly over the controls as she adjusted the radar settings, trying to pinpoint the exact location of the source. She had to be careful. One wrong move, and this could all come crashing down. The signal didn't seem to be moving, just stationary, but it was definitely getting closer. Kaela couldn't explain it, but she knew it was real. It was out there, and it was waiting for her to find it. Kaela's fingers danced across the controls as she tried to refine the signal's coordinates. The urgency in her chest was growing with every second. The signal had become clearer than ever, pulsating in rhythmic intervals, as if calling out to her. As she honed in on the data, she couldn't ignore the feeling that something momentous was happening. Her heart pounded in her chest as she watched the signal's source begin to take form. It wasn't like any of the ships or objects they had mapped in their system. This was something foreign, something from beyond their reach. The reading was unlike anything Zorvax had encountered before, a craft so far beyond their typical range that Kaela had to pause and double-check her calculations twice. The signal had origin coordinates so distant they shouldn't have been possible. The ship wasn't just beyond Zorvax, it was beyond even the outer rim of their galaxy. She leaned in closer to the screen, her mind racing. Could a human ship really be out here in this uncharted void? How had they come this far? Was it possible that someone from Earth had traveled across the cosmos to reach them? She felt a chill creep up her spine as the possibilities flooded her mind. The more she analyzed the data, the more certain she became. This was no ordinary vessel. It didn't fit the descriptions of any species the Zorvaxians had catalogued. This was something new, something that didn't belong in their carefully charted universe. Kaela knew she had to inform her supervisor immediately, but she hesitated as her fingers hovered over the transmission controls. She had already reported the signal, but this was something else now. The ship was becoming more defined on her radar, its signal too clear to be ignored. She knew this wasn't just a curiosity, this was real. This was a human ship, and it was out there alone in the vast emptiness of space. After a moment's hesitation, she opened the communication link again, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. "Sir, this is Kaela. The ship is not just an anomaly. It's real. It's a human vessel. Its readings don't match anything we've seen before, but I've checked the coordinates multiple times. It's coming from a place far beyond anything known to our people. This is a human ship." There was a long pause, and for a moment Kaela feared she had gone too far in her report. But then her supervisor's voice crackled through the speaker system. "This is serious, Kaela. The humans have never been known to venture this far into the galaxy. Do you have more data? I need specifics on this ship's condition and trajectory." Kaela quickly compiled the new readings, the coordinates, the energy signatures, the irregular patterns in its propulsion system. It all pointed to the same conclusion: a human ship far from home, lost in the far reaches of space. She could feel the weight of the moment settling on her shoulders. This was the first sign of human life outside the known systems, and it was happening now. "I'm preparing a full report, sir," she responded quickly. "But there's one thing I don't understand. The ship's signal, it's not just random or lost. It seems intentional. It's like they're trying to reach someone, like they're calling for help." There was another pause from her supervisor. This time, Kaela could hear the concern in his voice. "Keep monitoring it, Kaela, but don't make contact until we can assess the situation further. I need more information before we take any action." She nodded even though he couldn't see her, and as the transmission ended she turned back to the radar screen, her thoughts racing. Was this really happening? Had humans made it this far into the galaxy? And if so, what did that mean for Zorvax? What did it mean for her? Kaela couldn't shake the feeling of urgency that now gripped her every thought. The more she analyzed the signal, the more certain she became that this wasn't just a random encounter. This was something that demanded her full attention. She watched the radar carefully. Each flicker on the screen felt like it was pulling her deeper into the mystery of the human ship. Her mind raced as she tried to make sense of everything she had learned so far. The ship was still stationary, its signal growing stronger and clearer with each passing moment. She couldn't ignore the patterns anymore. It wasn't just trying to get their attention. It was reaching out to someone or something. She couldn't explain it, but it was almost as if the ship was asking for help. She leaned back in her chair, her fingers resting on the console, as she thought about what to do next. Her supervisor's voice still echoed in her head. "Don't make contact, Kaela, not yet. We need more data." But the more she thought about it, the more she knew she couldn't just sit back and wait. Her heart thumped in her chest. She had come so far already. The unknown was right there on the other side of the radar screen, and she couldn't just ignore it. She had to make contact. She had to reach out and find out who was out there. She glanced at the communication system, her hands hovering over the controls. She knew she was risking everything, but the thought of not doing anything was unbearable. Taking a deep breath, Kaela made her decision. Her fingers quickly punched in the coordinates and the message she had rehearsed over and over in her head. She pressed the button and waited for the transmission to go through. For a moment, there was nothing, just static and silence. She felt the tension in the air, as if time itself had stopped. Then, finally, a crackling voice came through the speakers. It was faint and distorted, but it was unmistakable. "This is Captain Ellis of the Odyssey. Can anyone hear us?" Kaela's breath caught in her throat. She had never heard a human voice before, but this was at the moment she had been waiting for, the moment that would change everything. She quickly adjusted the controls, trying to clear the static. The voice on the other end sounded strained and exhausted, but there was no mistaking the relief in the captain's voice. He had been waiting for this contact just as much as she had. "This is Kaela from Zorvaxian Command," she responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "We've been receiving your signal. We're here to help." There was a long pause, and then the captain's voice came back through, softer this time. "Thank you. We've been lost for so long. We didn't think anyone was out here. Can you help us? We need supplies. We need guidance. We don't know how much longer we can survive." Kaela felt a wave of compassion wash over her as the words sank in. The humans were stranded in deep space, cut off from any help, and they had no idea who had found them, or if anyone would answer their call. Kaela could hear the desperation in their voices, and it tugged at her heartstrings. She looked at the radar. Once more, the faint outline of the human ship still hovering on the edge of their galaxy, its signal still strong, but its energy dwindling with each passing minute. They didn't have much time if she was going to help them. She had to act quickly. "I'll get in touch with the command center," she said. "We'll send help, but you'll need to stay put for now. We'll send a ship to assist you and bring you supplies." "Thank you," Captain Ellis said, his voice filled with gratitude. "We're not sure how long we've got left. We'll stay here. Just don't leave us." As Kaela ended the transmission, she felt a surge of determination. She couldn't let them down. She couldn't let these humans die out here alone in the vastness of space. She had made contact, and now she had to act before it was too late. Kaela sat frozen in her seat, her mind still processing the conversation with Captain Ellis. The weight of his words hung in the air like a heavy burden. They weren't just stranded, they were desperate. Their survival was on the line, and Kaela knew the responsibility now rested on her shoulders. It wasn't just about making contact anymore, it was about saving lives. She quickly opened a secure channel to her supervisor, her fingers trembling as she input the necessary commands to initiate the connection. The silence in the room seemed deafening as she waited for the transmission to go through, and when her supervisor's voice finally came through, it sounded distant and cold. "Kaela, you've made contact with the humans. Good. Now tell me what you know." Her heart pounded as she summarized everything she had learned from Captain Ellis. Their situation was dire. They had been lost for years, running low on supplies and energy. Their ship was barely functioning, and they had no idea how far they had drifted into unknown space. The transmission had been their last hope. Kaela couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt knowing they had suffered for so long without anyone coming to their aid. She paused for a moment before continuing. "I've confirmed their location, sir. They're stranded on the edge of the galaxy far beyond our known range. They don't have enough fuel or supplies to survive much longer, and their life support systems are failing. We need to help them immediately." There was a long pause on the other end. As her supervisor processed the information, Kaela could feel the tension building in her chest, waiting for him to respond. She knew the rules, the protocols. They couldn't just send a ship to assist humans without thorough approval. But in this moment it felt wrong to wait. It felt like she was standing at the edge of something that could change the entire course of Zorvaxian history, and she couldn't turn away. "Kaela, I understand the urgency, but we can't just send help without consulting the Council. We need to assess the risks before taking any action." Kaela's frustration boiled over, but she kept her voice steady. "Sir, you don't understand. They're not just asking for supplies, they're asking for their lives. They need us now, not in a few days or weeks. They need help immediately. We can't risk losing them because of bureaucracy." Another pause followed, and Kaela's patience wore thin. She knew what she had to do, but she also knew the consequences. If she went against orders, there would be no coming back from this. Her career would be over. But in that moment, all she could think about were the humans stranded in the cold void of space, waiting for anyone to help them. Finally, her supervisor's voice came back through the speaker system, his tone less authoritative and more thoughtful. "Fine, Kaela, you've made your case. I'll authorize a rescue operation. But you're going to need to handle the logistics on your own. We're giving you permission to send a ship to assist them, but you'll be responsible for the entire operation." Kaela's breath caught in her throat, the weight of his words sinking in. She couldn't believe it. She had convinced him. She had convinced Zorvaxian Command to act. But now it was up to her to make it happen. She quickly composed herself and nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Understood, sir. I'll begin preparations right away." She ended the transmission and turned her attention back to the radar. The human ship still hovered on the edge of their galaxy, its signal strong, but its energy depleting with every passing minute. Kaela didn't have time to waste. She had to act quickly. She pulled up the schematics for Zorvaxian ships and began to coordinate with the rescue team. Everything needed to be in place if they were going to get to the Odyssey in time. Her mind raced as she calculated the quickest route to reach the human ship and how they would resupply it once they arrived. She was working against the clock now, and there was no turning back. Kaela's hands moved swiftly across the console. As she began organizing the details for the rescue mission, she had to think fast and act even faster. The rescue ship would need fuel supplies, medical kits, and a team of engineers who could help repair the Odyssey once they arrive. But every decision she made felt monumental. She wasn't just following orders anymore. She was creating a lifeline for the humans stranded in space. As the minutes ticked by, she felt a rising sense of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The clock was ticking, and if she made even one mistake, it could cost lives. Kaela didn't dare look away from her screen. She was entirely focused on the mission and the task at hand, but in the back of her mind, the reality of the situation kept creeping in. She was about to make history. She was about to be the one who made first contact with humans outside of Zorvaxian space. Her pulse quickened as she worked through the list of supplies and personnel she would need to send to the human ship, her fingers flying over the console inputs, each one a crucial decision. And then came the part that sent a chill down her spine, the communication relay. She had to reach out to the human ship once more and tell Captain Ellis they were sending help. She had to reassure him that they were coming to save them. Her hand shook as she initiated the transmission, her thoughts racing. But as soon as she heard the crackling static and Captain Ellis's voice come through once more, the knot in her stomach began to loosen. "This is Kaela from Zorvaxian Command," she said, trying to keep her voice calm and steady. "We're sending a rescue ship. It will be there soon with supplies and a team to assist you, but you need to stay where you are until they arrive." There was a long pause, and for a brief moment, Kaela thought the transmission had cut out, But then Captain Ellis's voice came back through, filled with relief and exhaustion. "Thank you, Kaela. You have no idea what this means to us. We've been stranded for so long. We didn't think anyone would find us. We'll stay put. Just please hurry." Kaela nodded. Even though he couldn't see her were coming, she said firmly, and with that, the transmission ended. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and then turned back to her console. It was time to coordinate the next steps. She had made contact, and the wheels were already in motion. The rescue ship was being prepped as they spoke, and Kaela knew there was no turning back now. The mission was on. She quickly began inputting the final details for the ship's trajectory and the necessary maneuvers to intercept the human vessel. The course was set, but it wasn't easy. This was uncharted territory, and the journey would take them deep into unfamiliar space. Zorvak's command had never ventured this far out before, but now they had no choice. The humans needed them, and Kaela would ensure they got there in time. Her screen flickered briefly as the radar updated the human ship's location. The signal was still there, but it was weaker than before. Kaela's stomach clenched with worry. She knew that every minute mattered. The Odyssey was running low on energy, and if they didn't arrive soon, it could be too late. She glanced at the countdown on her screen. The rescue ship would be ready for departure in less than an hour. She still had time to go over the final details, but she couldn't afford to waste a single second. Kaela's mind was already working through what was next. How would they ensure the safety of the humans? Once they boarded the ship, how would they navigate this unprecedented situation? But all of that would have to wait. Right now, the priority was simple: get to the Odyssey before it was too late. Kaela stood at the command center, watching as the rescue ship's preparations continued in a flurry of activity. All around her, the countdown on the screen reminded her that time was slipping away faster than she had anticipated. With every second that passed, the Odyssey drifted closer to the brink of exhaustion, its energy reserves fading fast. Kaela felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves as she continued monitoring the rescue operation. The crew had gathered, and the supplies were being loaded onto the ship, but there was still so much to do, so many unknowns. She had never been in charge of something so important, and the gravity of the situation made her hands tremble despite her best efforts to remain composed. The mission was unprecedented. Nothing like this had ever been attempted before. A rescue mission for humans who were stranded so far beyond Zorvak space. Kaela had spent the last few hours coordinating with the team and making sure everything was in place. But even with all her preparations, there was no guarantee they would make it in time. There were too many variables, too many dangers in this unknown sector of space. As she glanced at the radar once more, Kaela's heart sank. The signal from the Odyssey had weakened again. It was still there, but it was flickering. The bright pulse she had seen earlier was now just a faint echo in the dark void of space. She couldn't afford to lose contact with them. They had to know help was on the way. Her fingers hovered over the communication controls again. She had to reassure Captain Ellis that they hadn't been forgotten, that Zorvak's command was coming for them. Kaela didn't care about the protocols or the risks anymore. She only cared about the humans and their survival. "This is Kaela from Zorvaxian Command," she said as soon as the connection was established, her voice firm, but filled with urgency. "We're almost there. Please stay with us. We'll reach you soon, but you need to conserve as much energy as you can in the meantime." Captain Ellis's voice crackled through the static, sounding weaker this time, but still filled with hope. "We're doing our best, Kaela, but we're running out of options. The ship can barely hold together much longer." Kaela's heart clenched at his words. She could hear the strain in his voice, the exhaustion, the fear. They were so close yet so far away. There was no time to waste. She quickly added, "We're on our way as fast as we can. Just hold on." She ended the transmission and turned back to the console, her eyes scanning the coordinates for the 100th time. The course was set. They would reach the Odyssey in just over 3 hours. If everything went as planned, she only hoped that would be enough. The pressure in the room felt suffocating as the crew continued their work. Kaela tried to focus on the task ahead, but doubts crept into her mind. Was it enough? Would they get there in time? She couldn't let herself think about what might happen if they didn't. The consequences were too great to even consider. Her thoughts were interrupted by a quiet ping on the console. The final systems check was complete. The rescue ship was ready for launch. It was time. Kaela turned to face the team standing by the launch bay, her voice steady, but carrying the weight of the mission as she addressed them. "All right, everyone, the mission is underway. I know this is uncharted territory, but we need to get to that ship and bring them home. Stay sharp and stay focused. We can't afford to make mistakes." With a unified nod, the crew filed out of the command center to board the ship. Kaela watched them go, her thoughts consumed with the journey ahead. She knew this was a race against time, but she couldn't afford to let fear cloud her judgment. They had a job to do, and they were going to do it. The launch was smooth, a testament to the preparation and skill of the crew. As Kaela stood in the command center, watching the rescue ship's trajectory update on her screen, a sense of determination washed over her. This wasn't just a mission. It was a moment that would define everything. It wasn't just the first contact with humans. It was the first step toward something bigger, something unknown. But Kaela couldn't let herself get lost in the enormity of it all. There was work to be done, and time was running out. As the hours ticked by, Kaela monitored the rescue ship's progress closely, her eyes fixed on the fluctuating numbers. The energy signal from the Odyssey continued to flicker weakly, but it was still there, still hanging on in the vast emptiness of space. She had no idea how much longer the ship could last, but she knew they were getting closer. The team aboard the rescue ship was fully prepared: engineers, medical officers, and a small group of crew members trained to handle any unforeseen problems. They had all the equipment they might need to restore power to the Odyssey, but there was still a nagging uncertainty in the back of Kaela's mind. What if they weren't able to make it in time? What if the Odyssey's systems failed completely before they could help? The command center fell into a heavy silence, save for the soft beeping of the radar and the occasional rustle of equipment. Kaela's eyes were glued to the screen, but her thoughts were elsewhere. She found herself replaying the conversation with Captain Ellis, the desperation in his voice, the exhaustion in his words. They had been stranded for years, and she was their last hope. It was a heavy thought to carry, but she knew she couldn't afford to second-guess herself. She had to believe in their ability to get the job done. An hour passed, then another, and soon the rescue ship was on the final stretch of its journey. Kaela's fingers drummed nervously on the console, the tension in the air palpable. She watched as the ship's trajectory came closer to the human vessel's coordinates. They were nearing the outer rim of the galaxy, a place Zorvax had never ventured before. The unknown stretched out before them, but Kaela had no time to ponder the implications of their journey. The mission was their focus, and it had to succeed. The communications link buzzed to life, interrupting her thoughts. Kaela's pulse quickened as the familiar voice of Captain Ellis crackled through the static. "Kaela, we're holding on, but we don't know how much longer we can last. The ship's hull is weakening, and our systems are barely functioning. Please tell me you're close." Kaela's heart sank at the desperation in his voice. She took a steadying breath and replied, "We're just a few minutes out, Captain. Hang on. We're almost there." The tension was unbearable as the final moments of their journey stretched on. Kaela could feel the weight of history bearing down on her, but she didn't let it distract her. She had a job to do, and she wasn't going to fail. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the rescue ship's systems flashed green on the screen. Contact with the Odyssey had been established. Kaela's heart skipped a beat as the first images of the human ship appeared on her display. It was battered, its hull scarred by years of neglect and exposure, but it was still intact. The Odyssey was still alive. The rescue team quickly moved to board, stabilizing the ship's systems and beginning repairs. The connection was made. Humanity had been reached, and Kaela had kept her promise. They weren't alone anymore. The crew was safe. Kaela leaned back in her chair, a mix of exhaustion and relief flooding over her. The mission was a success. The humans had been saved. The first chapter of something new had been written, and Kaela knew that this was just the beginning.